The greatest danger you will ever face in pursuit of your success isn't failure. It isn't rejection. It isn't losing money on a trade. It isn't discovering that you're not as good as you thought you were. It's reaching the point where you start believing your own excuses. Because once an excuse stops sounding like an excuse and starts sounding like the truth, you will no longer feel any urgency to change it. And that's when it becomes dangerous. Excuses rarely sound like excuses. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm going to sabotage my future, right? We don't talk to ourselves that way. Instead, we say things that sound perfectly reasonable, right? I just don't have enough time right now. I'm going to get serious when things settle down. I need to just learn a little bit more first. I don't have enough money yet. The market has been difficult lately. I haven't found the right strategy. I'll start Monday. I'll do it next month. And perhaps my favorite, right? I'm just waiting for the right time. Individually, every one of those statements can sound completely rational. That's exactly what makes them so dangerous. The best excuses usually contain some truth. Maybe you really are busy, right? Maybe money really is tight. Maybe you've had setbacks. Maybe you've tried before and failed. Maybe you don't have experience yet, right? Maybe the circumstances generally aren't ideal. That's not the question. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because there's an enormous difference between an explanation and an excuse. An explanation says, here's the obstacle I'm facing. Now, how do I get around it? An excuse says something different. It says, here's the obstacle I'm facing, therefore I can't move forward. One creates a problem to solve, the other gives you permission to stop. Watch what happens when you repeat something long enough. This is where things get really scary. Tell yourself something once and you probably know it's an excuse, right? Tell yourself something for the exact same thing for 6 months and it starts becoming your story. I'm too busy. I'm not disciplined. I'm just not good with money. I'm too old to start, right? I'm not naturally talented. Trading just doesn't work for me. Eventually you stop questioning those statements, right? You begin defending them. You collect evidence supporting them. You tell other people about them. And before long, right, you're no longer making excuses for your circumstances. You're building an identity around them. Now that's an incredibly difficult prison to escape because the door isn't locked. You simply convince yourself that it is what it is. Why? Because trading is a perfect place to hide. I constantly see this with aspiring traders. Someone says they desperately want to become successful trading. And you ask them why they haven't developed a repeatable process yet. And they say, well, I haven't had enough time. Why aren't they journaling, right? Well, I've been busy, right? Why haven't they reviewed their last 50 trades, right? Well, I haven't gotten around to it yet. Why are they still jumping between strategies? Well, I haven't found one that works for me yet. Why aren't they practicing consistently, right? Well, I'm waiting until I have more capital. Why haven't they gotten help? Well, I want to figure it out myself first. Again, right? Some of these may be completely legitimate concerns, but eventually you have to ask yourself, are these problems I'm actually solving or explanations I've become comfortable living with? That's a different question because your results don't care about your reasons. Now that may sound harsh, but I think it's one of the most valuable lessons you can learn is that your goals don't negotiate with your excuses. If you want to lose 30 pounds, the scale doesn't care why you didn't execute. If you want to build a business, the marketplace doesn't care why you didn't make the calls. If you want to become a great musician, the guitar doesn't care why you didn't practice. And if you want to become a successful trader, the market doesn't care why you weren't prepared. Your reason may be completely understandable. It may even deserve some sympathy, but the outcome doesn't change. That's why eventually you have to stop asking, is my excuse justified? And start asking something different. Is this believing this helping me become the person I want to become? Now that's a question that exposes almost every excuse. So the next time you hear yourself explain why you haven't done something you need to do, add 5 words. And what am I doing about it? I don't have enough time. And what am I doing about it? I don't have enough money. And what am I doing about it? I don't understand this yet. And what am I doing about it? I failed before, and what am I doing about it? I don't have the discipline, and what am I doing about it? Suddenly the conversation changes because you're no longer debating whether the obstacle exists. You're taking responsibility for your own response to it. And that's where the power comes back into the equation, right? So be careful becoming your own defense attorney. Most people are unbelievably good at arguing their own case. We can explain exactly why we didn't succeed, why we didn't start, why we quit, right? Why we weren't ready, why someone else had an advantage, why the circumstances weren't right. And if we argue the case long enough, we convince the jury, right? Unfortunately, we're also the jury. That's why self-awareness is so important. Sometimes you have to catch yourself in mid-explanation and ask, am I explaining my situation or defending my lack of action? Those are not the same thing, right? So here's an exercise worth doing. Write down the goal you say you desperately want. Then underneath it, write, why haven't I achieved this yet? Don't make it sound good, right? Don't make it sound inspirational. Don't write down what you think you're supposed to say. Write down the real reasons. Then look at each one and ask, is this actually impossible or merely difficult? Is this something that I cannot control or something I haven't prioritized? Is it something have I tried everything, or is I just tried a few things and I got discouraged? Am I looking for just, a solution or just asking for solutions? These answers may be far more valuable than another motivational speech, because the most dangerous excuse is the one that makes you feel better. That's ultimately what excuses do. They protect us. They protect our ego from having to admit, right, maybe I haven't given this everything I could. Because that's painful, my friends. It's much easier to believe circumstances are responsible, but there's a hidden price for that comfort. The excuse that protects your ego today can steal your future tomorrow. And that's why failure isn't ultimately your greatest enemy. You can fail and learn, right? You can lose and rebuild. You can make mistakes and improve. You can start from scratch. But once you become completely convinced that your excuses are facts, you stop looking for another way. And the moment you stop looking for another way is the moment your circumstances become permanent. So pay attention to the stories you tell yourself, especially the reasonable ones, the ones you've been repeating for years, especially the ones nobody challenges anymore. Because eventually your life starts to become a reflection of the stories you believe. And perhaps the most dangerous story you could ever tell yourself is, I would have succeeded if only things had been different. Maybe, but there's a much more powerful question, right? What if things never became different? What are you going to do anyway? Because the people who ultimately change their lives aren't necessarily the people who had fewer obstacles. They're often the people who finally decided my obstacles can explain where I am, but they will no longer decide where I go.